Hey guys, and welcome to Petrol Ped. Now behind me is a car that I know is going to divide opinion, the Range Rover. If you're like me, you may well absolutely love them. For me, they are the pinnacle, the benchmark of premium SUVs. But in the hate camp, oh boy, there's plenty of people who will criticize their reliability, their depreciation, and at the moment they have some big challenges in terms of theft and insurance. In this video, there is plenty to unpack. So yes, the Range Rover. Now, would you believe Range Rover has been around since 1970? That makes it older than me. There's not many things nowadays older than me. But this is now the 6th generation of Range Rover. I don't think in the early days it was ever meant to be this luxury high-end SUV that was driven around cities as some kind of status symbol. It was very much a utilitarian vehicle with just a bit more comfort and practicality than the series Land Rover at the time. But through the years, through the generations, these cars have got better and better and better. And this latest generation, the plaudits are high. And I think if you are a fan, then the way these cars drive, the way they make you feel, the comfort levels, they're the things that you would talk about. Many of the haters, the detractors, the people that have a go at these vehicles, I'm pretty sure most of them have never driven one. And I'd always say, if you are going to criticize a Range Rover, drive one, because they are exceptional vehicles to drive. But those that criticize them would criticize their sheer size, the environmental credentials of them. Why would you need a car this big? And then I think the biggest challenge with Range Rover and Land Rover product in recent years is a lot of criticism around their reliability. And I want to talk about that a little bit in this video. The other problem that they have, particularly Range Rover in the last few years, is a big problem with theft, because not only are they attractive to potential buyers, to people like me who love them, but they're also quite attractive to organized criminal gangs who will steal these for making money. And again, we need to talk about that as well. But overall, I think this 6th generation of Range Rover is a handsome looking vehicle. When they came out in 2022, I thought I need to get my hands on one of those. And this is a 2022 car. And it's a good mate of mine, Mark Boyd, who runs the Drone Safe store. Basically, he reached out and said, if you want to have my car for the day to do a video, then knock yourself out, fill your boots. So a big thanks, Mark, for letting me have the car. So let's kind of get the elephant in the room out of the way, and it's a big Range Rover sized elephant. Okay, let's talk theft. See that? Keyless entry. So this is the key. I get anywhere near the car and it unlocks and I can get into the car. And it's not just Land Rover that does that. By the way, one of my criticisms of this car would be, I think the key is a little bit low rent. For such an expensive premium car, I'd want a key that, I don't know, had a bit more gusto about it than that. But keyless entry cars, basically what they're doing constantly is the key is emitting a signal and the car is looking for that signal all the time. And whenever I get within a certain range, like it's just done now, the car will unlock and I can get into the car. And one of the challenges with that is it's possible to intercept that signal. And the name for that is what's called a relay attack. And the idea is normally criminals, there's two of them. One of them will, if your keys are in your house, they'll get near your house looking for the signal coming from the key, and then they'll have a piece of equipment that will take that signal, amplify it, transmit it to their mate who stood near your car, and then basically pretend to be the key. The car will unlock and they'll get in the car and maybe steal stuff in the car, or in some cases get in the car and drive it away. And that's a big challenge. The other security vulnerability of Range Rover is what's called the body control module, and in that case the thieves basically hack into the body control module and then gain access to the car. So the theft problem with Range Rover kind of depends on the age of the car, and Land Rover, Range Rover have spent a huge amount of money. By all accounts, it's some £10 million trying to solve this problem. And I don't think it's a unique problem to them. It just so happens that the organised gangs that do this kind of stuff really like Range Rovers, and they clearly can make a lot of money from them. So two things: the newer cars with this relay attack method, they've changed the radio frequencies between the key and the car to use what's called ultra wideband. It feels like I'm doing my telecoms training job. And the ultra wideband based keyless entry systems are far less vulnerable to that relay attack method. And then the older cars, basically they're doing software upgrades to that body control module to make them less vulnerable as well. And it depends on where you live as to the threat level, if you like. So if you live in London, that's the biggest hotspot, the biggest area. So by all accounts, they're focusing all of their energies on making sure that people in the most vulnerable places get the upgrades that they need to make their cars less vulnerable to theft. I guess the challenge is, and it's no different really to virus software running on your PC, it's an arms race between the car manufacturers and their security systems in the car and the organised crime gangs that are well funded with very clever people always trying to break the systems. The second someone comes out and says, our keyless entry system is impregnable, it's impossible to break it, somebody will break it. So there are things being done by Land Rover and Range Rover to protect not just the Range Rover product, but also things like Defender, Range Rover Sport, Velar, Discovery Sport. But once the car gets nicked, that's a problem, and that then goes on to your insurance, and insurance is the next big issue. Now, just quickly, before we start talking about insurance, one of the ways you can protect yourself or mitigate the car being stolen is your keyless entry key. If you put that into what's called a Faraday pouch, and you can Google these, find them on Amazon, it just blocks that RF signal coming from the key. So when you've got your keys stored at home, in your house, put them in a little pouch, and that should help the problem anyway. The challenge is, though, once these cars have been stolen, if the rate of theft starts to get quite high, that then starts to get insurance companies worried. And the problem with Range Rover is most of the theft, in fact, I would argue almost all of the theft that's taking place, isn't casual thieves nicking cars, it's organised criminal gangs. And they will steal your car, and that car is taken away, and it's either broken down into pieces for resale, or it's put in a container and it's shipped to some other country in the world. So the chances are for the insurance company, it is a total loss, and they have to then pay out on the premium. And bearing in mind, these start at £102,000. So each car that's stolen is really expensive. And what that means is it's now the case, and I'm sure anecdotally you will have heard of friends telling you this, I get it in comments all the time on my channel, where people want to buy one of these, but when they go and get their insurance quotation, they either can't get insured or the insurance is so expensive that it's just not worth them buying the car, and they'll go and look at some other brand and buy that instead. And the problem has got so acute that Land Rover have actually started their own insurance premium product to sell directly to their customers. So it is a big challenge. So it may well be, it's very dependent on who you are and where you live, that you want to buy a Range Rover and you can't because you literally can't get insured. And it's now started to rain, so I'm going to go in and I'm going to have a shelter from the rain, and then I'm going to come out and tell you a little bit more about the spec of this car, and then we're going to take it for a drive. It stopped raining. Let's crack on before it starts raining again. So let's talk about size, because the first thing you'll think about when you think of a Range Rover is they are massive, and they are quite big. I'll round the numbers up a little bit, but pretty much it's 5 meters long, 2 meters wide, and just over 1.8 meters high, which is big. But let's just put that into context. I was at the press drives for the brand new VW ID.7 last week, which is an electric saloon car, and that was 5 meters long. So I don't think they are that unusual anymore. There are plenty cars of a similar size and footprint. You'll notice, by the way, I'm stood close to the car, so it's constantly locking and unlocking itself, which is a little bit annoying. But they are big and they are imposing. Now, the benefit of that is inside there is huge amounts of space. The downside of it is living with them it's a big car. I also just wanted to talk about the wheels, okay? Because I think from the side profile, those wheels don't look too big, do they? Well, not that long ago, let's say 5-10 years ago, most road cars, I'd argue, had 17, maybe 18-inch wheels. 19-inch wheels were a big upgrade. I can then remember seeing a car with 20-inch wheels and watching things like Pimp My Ride on MTV, where they'd put Dub 2s, the 22-inch wheels on a car. That is a 23-inch wheel. 23 inches. I mean, I think it, because of the car being so big, it looks about right. But one of the things to bear in mind, a new set of tyres are going to cost you somewhere between 450 to 500 pounds a corner. Yep, £2,000 for a new set of rubber. But if the car's big on the outside, let's have a look at practicality at the rear. Now, one of the challenges that Range Rover designers must have had is how to improve on the 5th generation, because for me, that was a handsome car. It must be a little bit like Porsche designers trying to get the 911 to be better each time. But I think aesthetically on the outside, they've done a great job. It's a really sleek, smooth design, and my favorite view is this rear view. I love the way that the tail lights just disappear into the bodywork. When the car's driving in the daytime, you can hardly see them at all. But it's a very handsome rear end. If we just pop the tailgate open and we start to see into this absolutely cavernous boot, it maintains the trademark split tailgate. And this tailgate that drops down, you can sit on it, and you can, when you're at your shoot, you can sit here and warm up with a nice cup of tea from your thermos. That is a huge boot in there. And then you've got a whole bunch of motorized things. I can basically lower or raise the tailgate. And we're going to go up here, look. I'm in an access mode at the moment, so it's kind of raising up to full ride height, or I can drop it back down again. Very, very cool. That's the powered parcel shelf. Yeah, no, it's a really, really very smart thing. And then under here, we've got room for a space saver wheel if you wanted one, or a spare tyre rather. You could have you could, I guess, store loads of stuff in there as well. It's just a very practical, very lovely thing. Rear passenger room, one of the beauties of this is, first off, you've got a massive boot without dropping the seats down. You drop the rear seats down, you could literally probably live in there. But rear passenger comfort should be very good. And I love when I finish sitting there, I just push that one and it kind of closes itself up. Very smart. It's very nice in here. Now, this car's actually the base level trim, the SE model, and it's still very premium feeling in here, but there's just so much space. When we get in the front and we start the car, there's a panoramic glass roof, which makes it really nice and airy and light in here. These seats are so comfortable, easily for adults, but this central seat here, there's plenty of space for a 5th adult as well, even with a full boot full of stuff. And it just feels nice and comfortable and relaxed. You've even got electronically adjustable seats, which are just really nice. You can just get into a nice position, have a really nice, comfortable, relaxing passenger ride in this car. Stunning. The interior of a Range Rover for me has always been a special thing. Certainly the last couple of generations. I spent quite a bit of time in a 5th generation car. These seats, it's like sitting in your most comfortable leather sofa. They are really nice. And interesting, one of the things Mark was saying, he's had lots and lots of Range Rovers because he had a back injury some years ago, and these cars are just so comfortable on a long journey. And I get it, I completely get it. The other thing is you've got these little armrests here. I had these in my Range Rover Sport, and you do end up kind of driving along with your kind of elbow on them, and it's a very kind of relaxing place to be. Let's just fire the car up. And then we've got the sunshade on the pan roof. Will go back, and it just makes the car just come alive. Pivi Pro floating screen, very similar to, in fact, pretty much the same system I've got in the Defender. And I like that a lot indeed. And then just the choice of materials. As I said, this is the SE model. So Just a quick one. So Mark actually bought this used, and one of the reasons I wanted to do a video with this car is new. So the SE model Range Rover, which is the entry-level version, comes in at £102,000. They go through HSE and then up into the autobiography spec, and by the time you're at autobiography, you're at around about £150,000. And I've actually seen an SV autobiography, which is the very top level one with the supercharged V8 in it. They're nearly pretty much £200,000. So new, they are a lot of money. And one of the criticisms that Range Rover get angled at them is depreciation. So Mark bought this car, so book value of this car £102,000. It was a year old with 20,000 miles on the clock, so it clearly had a good amount of use in the first year, and Mark paid £87,000 for this car. So, you know, as a used proposition, I know that's still a huge amount of money, and I've promised to do more affordable cars this year, but I thought it was quite interesting to look at Range Rover, because when these first came out, they were selling over list. I have a friend of mine who bought one of these, very, very early one, and it was at £50,000 over list the day he picked it up. Very tempting just to give it straight back. So I think actually there are some good used deals to be had on Range Rover. I know we've talked about insurance. That might be a problem for some people. I think the whole reliability issue, I honestly think that a lot of that, yes, Range Rover aren't perfect. Yes, there will be cars that come back. Yes, you'll always hear of someone who has a mate or has had one of these and had a problem. But I think you find that with all manufacturers. So, you know, I think in terms of the warranty and the ownership of these cars, that wouldn't personally put me off. I've had a number of Land Rover and Range Rover products. But I think as a used proposition, these are interesting buys now. So let's take this car up the road for a drive. It's a big old hoss, 5 meters long, 2 meters wide, but it really doesn't drive like that at all. These things never fail to make me smile. They are effortless. Now, it's worthwhile saying that the Range Rover comes in a range of different powertrain options. There's a plug-in hybrid, there's a couple of diesels, there's a couple of petrols. This is a very silky smooth diesel. You know what I'm like about the D300 in my Defender long-termer. They're just effortless. They just waft along. And I think for me, when you drive a Range Rover, it is that effortless driving. Potholes, you don't want to worry about potholes in this. It just gently just eases over them. So, you know, for the kind of roads that we have currently in the UK, these things are brilliant. The driving position is fantastic. You're so high up. The visibility around corners, over hedges, is just, it gives you an extra level of security. But you do need to be aware, it's a big car. It's wide, it's long, it's tall, it's heavy. So it takes a little bit of getting used to. If you're not used to, you know, I hop in and out of cars of all sizes every day and adjust very quickly when I get into a new car. But I can imagine for some, if they've come from smaller cars, a Range Rover could be quite intimidating. But Tracy has spent quite a bit of time driving Range Rovers and she loves them. They're just so effortless. In terms of maneuvering this car in tight spaces and the dynamics of driving, it's got four-wheel steering, and what that does in slow speed maneuvering is it means this car, the turning circle is fantastic considering its size. It really is impressive, and that means maneuvering it in a car park really isn't a problem at all. This is as much off-road as I dare take Mark's car, to be honest. But it's worth noting that whilst these cars are amazing on road, where they really shine is off-road, and they are perhaps one of the most capable off-road cars you can buy. They're phenomenal things. And I've had the experience of putting one of these to its paces off-road, and they defy all the laws of physics. They're incredible things, but it's not my car, so I know that wasn't really off-road. It was just took it down there to take a photograph for the thumbnail. But you could, and I guess there's a big market for these in the countryside for people who, I don't know, shoot those types of things, where you know, in fact, one of the last times I went on a live shoot, I was in a Range Rover and we went all over the farm, and it literally just went everywhere. So I think it's safe that we'll probably all agree that this is great off-road. It's got the terrain response system that you find in lots of Land Rover products. But on the road, the dynamics of driving this thing on the road are really very, very impressive indeed. So let's try and find some juicy bits of tarmac, some twisty bits. I've now come up to the top of the trundle which is near me, and I'm now in the clouds. The weather's that bad today, but you know, if you put your foot down out the corner, it lifts its skirt, it gets a wiggle on really nicely. But then the thing that just amazes me whenever I drive big, you know, 2.5 ton plus vehicles, is how the dynamic engineers at Land Rover get these cars to behave the way they do in the corners. You know, back in the day, you know, big heavy SUVs would wallow around and tip and bend into corners. They'd be really very uncomfortable places to drive quickly or to push on. And you just don't get that feeling in this car. It's got very good dynamic road manners. It's not a sports car, don't get me wrong, but if you want to, you know, you're on your way home and you get a nice flowing bit of A or B road and you want to push on a little bit. The rear wheel steering, by the way, you really notice it in the tighter corners. The back end comes around just really quickly, and it almost shortens the wheelbase. It feels like you're in a much shorter, squatter, more maneuverable car. Really very, very impressive. But yeah, boy, the fog's come down now, look, wow. I've not had the opportunity to drive this car in the dark, but Mark says the headlights are outstanding. But that doesn't really surprise me, because my Defender long term has got some pretty good lamps on the front of it, to be fair. But yeah, it just wafts along. It just smooths out any imperfections in the road. It's so comfortable, so smooth, and you don't have to drive one of these for very long to realise why everybody makes such a big deal of them. So this video, I kind of wanted just to have a chat about Range Rover, I guess to position it as a potential used car. I'm not going to say bargain. You couldn't possibly use the word bargain and then say, oh, it's £86,000, but I think there are some good deals on. I really do think, though, that Land Rover and Range Rover products, there's a lot of work to be done. I don't think it's PR work necessarily, but just in terms of their reliability. And I think as a brand, that has let them down in a big way. Whether that's actually reliability, but there's plenty of surveys out there that say these are, you know, amongst the most unreliable cars on the UK roads. Land Rover needs to sort that out, because that, for me, is damaging their brand, putting people off. And then the issues around security that I talked about before, that's a huge issue for them, because I'm sure that there will be plenty of Range Rover customers out there that just won't go near them because of worries about security, or aren't able to get insured for them. So that they need to sort that out. But if you're in a position, depending on where you live, you've got off-street parking and you're not living in a city centre, you're not living anywhere near London, and you are able to get insured on them, they're a magnificent car. A truly, truly magnificent car. And I'm still a fan. And the 6th generation of Range Rover is even better than the 5th generation Range Rover, and that was good. Really, really good. Anyway, the fog's closed in. It's not ideal conditions to be filming, to be fair. So I'm going to draw this video to a close. I want to say a massive thank you to my mate Mark from the Drone Safe store. He's the guy who did all the drone footage on that Audi R8 video I did just before Christmas. Absolute legend, but a massive thanks for him letting me play with his car for the day, because it's been really, really interesting. And yeah, it's a beautiful, beautiful thing. Put in the comments, what do you think? Are JLR doing enough about their vehicle security? What do you think of Range Rover? Do you love them? Do you hate them? I'm sure there's plenty on either side out there. Let's start having a bit of a debate in the comments, shall we? But for now, I'm going to head back to the Drone Safe store and swap my car back over. Give Mark this one back. But I hope you enjoyed that. If you did, give me a thumbs up. Comments below are always welcome, and if you haven't done so already, please subscribe to Petrol Ped for plenty more content to come, and I'll see you on the next film. You take care, guys. Drive safe.